Okay, so in lesson 24, we're being introduced to functions. Now, so what we're going to do specifically, we're going to be creating them and using functions for blocks of code that perform a single high-level task within a program. By the end of the lesson as well, not so much in this video, hopefully you guys are able to also explain why we want to be using functions in a program. So that's essentially the goal of lesson 24. Now, for our video's sake, of course, we're just going to focus on the programming portion. Oops. So in the second bubble, we're being asked to call the functions. Okay, so there's two parts of a function. One, you're going to define the function. Think of a glossary, right? Like if you have a textbook or something, at the end of the book, there's the glossary that defines the vocabulary. That's essentially what a function, defining a function is. You're, in this case, at the end of our program, we're defining a function, in this case, draw balloons. Okay, we're going to have to also, so this just tells us the definition, what that function does. We also need to call the function. And that's how you actually use it. So if all you do, again, a textbook, right? If all they do is have the definition in the glossary, it doesn't help out. It doesn't really do anything. However, in the middle of the textbook, they're going to use the vocabulary. In this case, we're going to call the function. So that's what we're doing. We're using it, and we're going to call it. Okay, so what we do is we're going to go ahead and call a function. Okay, so this chunk right here, this block is to actually define it. Here we call it. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and call the function. We're going to call it right up here. So the first thing that's happening, they've already called draw sky. Okay, they've already called it, meaning when I run it, it draws the sky. But now I want to draw the balloons as well. So I'm going to go ahead and say draw balloons. Okay, and when I do that, it draws the balloons. In other words, we called this function. Okay, and it does point out, and I want to point this out as well. So spelling we know is important, but capitalization is important as well. If I just put draw balloons with all lowercase, it's not going to work out. Okay, so I need to make sure the capitalization is the same as well. Okay, on to the next bubble. We're going to go ahead and remember or consider the placement or the sequence of the code. So placing code inside a function makes it easy to read and make changes as well. Good names for functions indicate what your program is doing to a reader. You can call your functions in a different order to quickly make significant changes to how your program runs. So this is what we're going to do. This program has already created 4 functions that draw parts of a scene. Unfortunately, it's not coming out correctly. So we're going to read the 4 functions, see what they do, call the functions in order that draws the scene the way that looks best to us. So let's actually just go ahead and run it. And I thought to actually put it in a specific order, I guess not. So we actually have to call the different functions. So they've defined already, draw background, draw trees, draw clouds, draw fence. Okay, so without even reading or looking through the specific blocks, they created a name for the function that's descriptive and specific. So I know what it does without even reading the specific code, and that's good practice. But that being said, let's go ahead and call the functions. Let's just go ahead and do it in the order they gave it to us. Okay, so draw background, I'm going to draw trees. What's the next one? Draw clouds. Draw clouds. And then the final one is draw the fence. Okay, and let's go ahead and take a look at what it looks like. Okay, well, it looks okay, but there are possibly some things we might want to change. I think the main thing is the clouds we might want behind the trees. Right, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is essentially look at the order. Okay, the background, the code that's written first is the farthest behind. So the background is the very back. That makes sense to me. Then the trees, that seems a little off. The clouds after that, and then the fence. I think I'm okay with the fence being in front of everything, but like I mentioned, maybe the clouds I want to appear before the trees. Okay, so to me that looks a lot better. Okay, you might have a different preference, but to me that works out, so I'm happy with this order. I'm going to go ahead and just describe, actually no, I'm not going to do this one, I'm going to just move on to the practice. Let's go and practice the 4 problems here. So we're going to practice calling a function in a draw loop. So you can call functions inside the draw loop just as you would anything else in your code. A function that would draw a background has been created for us. A sprite has been created to move across the background. Let's actually just run it and see what's happening. Okay, so of course it looks like we're going to have to make some changes. So let's do this. Call the function inside the draw loop so the sprite appears on top of the background. So we actually don't have a background yet, right? It's the white. We also know that because here the triangle, it has a yellow alert saying that it's not called in our program. So let's call it again before inside the draw loop so it appears on top of the background. Okay. So let's actually do this. I'm going to go ahead and call it right here first. Okay, so I called my trees background and I run it. And again, because we have the background first and then the sprites, it's working out for us. My background is being created and then the sprite is being drawn on top of it. If I do it the other way around, technically the sprite is there, but it's behind this background because we drew the background after we drew the sprites. Okay, so we want to make sure the background appears before. Okay, I'm okay with having the background here. Another thing to note is that they actually told us we don't want to create the functions inside the draw loop. Make them inside our code. I'm actually not sure what that means. Yeah, so I'm just going to move on ahead. I think when they're talking about defining the, I think they're just trying to tell us not to define the functions in the draw loop. But I'm going to go ahead and move on ahead. All right, next one. So this is kind of the looping, right? We've done the game in the past where we're going to be looping it. So you'll often want to use the same code at many places in your program. Once you create a function, you can call it as many times as you like. So this is one of the good reasons we use functions, so that we don't have to keep typing the same code over and over again. This code creates a sprite that moves across the screen once. How can you make it go back across the screen? Note the function is already called once at the beginning of our program, setFlyer. Read the condition of the if statement inside the draw loop. Why do we think it's there? Okay, so, and then we'll use the if statement and the function written for us already to make the sprite move across the screen multiple times. In other words, we're gonna loop the sprite to the beginning. So it looks like they set the flyer in the beginning right here, right? The X, Y, and velocity position, that's the initialization. It looks like when the flyer reaches X at 50, which is right here, this line right here, we're going to have the flyer, we want to have the flyer loop, right? Okay, so what I'm going to do is if the flyer's X position is less than -50, sorry, negative is on the left side, we're going to go ahead and set the flyer again. So instead of typing all 3 of these codes again, I'm just going to go ahead and call the function again, set flyer. This is beneficial because 1, it's just faster to do since we've already defined it. Secondly, it makes our code easier to read if other people are reading our code. All right, I'm going to go ahead and go to the third one. Okay, now here's another reason we might want to use the function. Okay, a nice benefit of using functions is to remove repeated code that is that you can now easily make changes to multiple places in your code. Just change how you create the functions and your program will use the new code everywhere your function's called. Right? So we set the flyer, Now, okay, well, maybe we want to make changes to the set flyer function so the flyer starts at a random y position and moves at a random velocity. So instead of me having to change it at multiple places, right here and right here, I need to just make the changes where I define the function. So at a random y position between 0 and 400, so I'm going to replace the y position. Okay, I'm going to put a random number between 0 and 400. That's the first thing. And the second, we're going to make a move at random velocity. So I'm just going to go ahead and say maybe -3 to -1. Okay, so let's take a look at this. Okay, so random y position. And then when it loops, it's going to be another random y position and maybe a different velocity as well. Okay, so instead of having to make those changes multiple times, I just had to change it once where it defined the function. Okay, and this is kind of just the final practice. Okay, in the game lab, all the action is happening in the draw loop, but too much complex code makes it really confusing to read. To keep your draw loop easy to read, use functions for a larger chunk of code. You can call them inside the draw loop and define them below. This is a really good example of that word again, abstraction, to think about programs at a high level and worry about the details later. Okay, so what they're saying is, okay, we want it so that if the mouse's cursor or the y position is above 200, we're going to draw the night. So if it's down here somewhere, we draw a night. If it's on top, we draw a day. So we planned that out already, right? We planned those functions. We haven't said it, we haven't defined it yet, but we've planned that out. Okay, now what we need to do is just go ahead and write the definition. Okay, so well, what do we want to look like? We could kind of mimic this, right? So again, if I hit run, this is the daytime. And oops, daytime, so I put my cursor on top. I don't have a night function yet. That's why I kind of froze right there. But daytime, nighttime. Okay, so let's go ahead and define the night. I'm not gonna do the best job. I'm just gonna go ahead and maybe just change the background color, right? I'm just gonna go ahead and set the background. Let's just change it to black color. Oops. We're gonna put it in the function, draw night. And I'm just gonna say, I don't know, dark blue. Okay, I'm not gonna go through all the stuff, the water and such, but let's just kind of show, okay? So again, daytime, nighttime, daytime, nighttime. And now I just need to finish draw night. Again, technically speaking, I could have put everything in this code here because I might not use this function again, but again, it gets messy. Okay, so that way we just have to look at the draw loop. All right. So again, I'm not drawing exactly as it is here, but you get the point, hopefully. All right, so I think that's all I wanted to get through for functions. Hopefully this video helped.